Welcome to Jadonna Live. For those of you who are new to Jadonna Live, thank you so much for being here. And for returning listeners, what's good? What's good? What's good? What's good? Happy to have you here. So wanted to kind of just start out and say, if you're new to Jadonna Live, this is a podcast currently undergoing renovation. But we are doing a rebrand, a revamp. But the goal is for you to be able to come as you are while being open to being challenged and being open to think about things maybe critically, more critically than you are currently. I love the kind of mantra of working on my mantra right now for the podcast. So there's that. But yeah, thank you so much for checking it out, and hopefully you stick around and I can show you why. I'm still doing some fun giveaways for folks who are able and willing to leave a review for the podcast if you have listened. And I think Spotify and Apple Podcasts actually make you listen before you can leave a review. So if you have and you would like to rate Jadonna Live, I am gladly grabbing a couple coffees for folks who send me an email, which I will mention at the end of the podcast what it is. But send me an email with a screenshot of your review, and yeah, you get a coffee on me. So let me know, and really appreciate that support. The more reviews, the more people who can know about the pod and then check the pod out. So really excited for you all to do that. So we've got one more week of our April affirmations. Do one set of affirmations for the entire month. So again, one more week of those, and then we'll have a whole new set for May. So let's get on over and check those out. Now it is time for the affirmation segment. For those new to the podcast, I conduct an affirmation segment every episode where I invite you to repeat life-giving phrases out loud, ingraining them into your subconscious mind. The goal is to be more intentional about who you want to be and where you're going, and I've used an affirmations practice to aid myself in doing that for, oh my gosh, probably like 3 years now. So what you're welcome to do is listen to each affirmation first, then repeat them out loud with me. My purpose for this segment this month, because I do one affirmation a month, is to have a spring into action. I've had a lot of conversations with people lately, and they've all been about creativity and how to harness that creativity. So the goal is really to kind of turn those thoughts and desires into action to create this month. So again, let's get this started. I learn what I like. I learn what I like. I create what I like. I create what I like. I turn the creative ideas from my head into reality with my hands. I turn the creative ideas from my head into reality with my hands. I create with curiosity. I create with curiosity. I create freely and without judgment. I create freely and without judgment. I learn from my mistakes. I learn from my mistakes. I am confident in my creativity. I am confident in my creativity. I surround myself with people who encourage my creativity. I surround myself with people who encourage my creativity. I surround myself with people who think critically about my creations. I surround myself with people who think critically about my creations. I market what I create with confidence. I market what I create with confidence. I market what I create with humility. I market what I create with humility. And I create better versions of my work all the time. I create better versions of my work all the time. I know what I like. I know what I like. And I create what I like. I create what I like. All right. Thanks for doing that with me. If you want to repeat it and do it one more again, feel free to, and let's move on. All right. Welcome to Mini Moments with me, Jadonna. Like I've told you all probably a trillion times at this point, I'm doing a pod revamp. Okay. And that includes new segments, trying things out, seeing how it fits, and moving forward. This segment will be called Mini Moments, and it'll be a time where I will kind of pop in, have a conversation with you all about something solo, and we'll kind of pop right back out. So, really excited to talk today about something that has been on my mind for a minute. Had an experience at work a couple months ago. I'm at a fairly new job and people still don't know me super well at this place I'm at. And for some people, starting a new job, being with completely new people, it may always look the same for you. For me, being a very just like confident, embodied, bold person, it is always a transition. And people don't know me at my current job super well. It's also not really a job where if you aren't a certain level or you haven't been there for a while, that people really take the time to have a genuine interest in you. No shade. It's just one of those roles where you kind of come in and I come in, do my job, and leave, which for me isn't a very common way I work, just to be honest. So anyway, was walking with a group of colleagues a couple months ago back at work. And it was after our lunch break. We were walking back to the office, and I'm, walking a little bit ahead, just living my life. I don't know. What I didn't notice was that the rest of my colleagues ended up going a different direction, I guess the direction they typically go. And we're not in the office very much, so I just kind of, went the way I was feeling, doing my own thing, whatever. As I kind of went my own direction, one of my friends who remained with the rest of the group heard someone, one of our colleagues kind of say, "Oh, Jadonna, she's always got to go her own way." And mentioned that to me later on. It, not verbatim, but something of that sort. Something just speaking to, like, me not going the way the rest of the group went, which, whatever. So, sure, I wouldn't have known if I hadn't been talking to my friend, but she told me, whatever. And not even in, like, a shady way. She was just like, "Oh, ha, blah, 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 made this comment. That's funny." And I was just like, honestly, at first, didn't really know how to take it. Despite being confident and bold and whatever, I'm still a super just sensitive person. And so when I heard that initially, I was like, damn it, felt insecure. My thoughts started to kind of like, and I'm like, why would she say that to everyone? She doesn't even know me. Why would she say it in front of people? Like, how does that make me look? And I was literally just walking. Is she that insecure that she was threatened by me going a new direction? Blah, blah, blah. Just a lot of different thoughts where I feel like, well, damn. Just like great. Like a bad impression, just trying to live my life. And so after processing that internally and with a handful of people over the course of the next few days, I felt honestly less insecure, which I'm really proud about. And more so, I started to think like, I feel bad for her. Like if she cares that much about someone just walking to even make a comment. And I understand this isn't even that big of a deal, but for me, I was like, why even make a comment? Like, why does something like that even elicit a comment from someone? So I was listening to an affirmation segment actually a few months ago that encouraged being an avid observer and not casting meaning onto every single thing you see and just being like, huh, okay, and moving on. And I felt like upon reflection, this was actually one of those instances where instead of making meaning, I could reflect and kind of just have like a moment. As I already said, my first thought was, oh, I already changed it. Okay. As I already said, my first thought was, I feel so bad for people who are that insecure that they care so much about someone walking a different way and, would make a comment like that. She must be so insecure, whatever. And the reality is, I'm like, I do not know this person that much to make a judgment like that. One, I don't know how she does or does not feel. I don't want to assume someone is insecure because then I kind of question myself. Like, does me assuming that person made that comment out of insecurity make me feel better? Do I feel better that someone feels insecure? That goes against kind of everything I stand for. I don't want anybody to feel insecure, so I don't really love that thought either. And so the reality is, I'm like, okay, I observed something, a comment that my friend told me, and in light of the affirmations I heard recently, have been thinking like, oh, how do I just kind of observe that without making a judgment on that person? How do I just kind of take this and make it just that, an observation? This person made that comment, and all right, interesting. Not sure what that has to do with me, if it has anything to do with me. And I would just like to say, as a chronic overthinker, hence me bringing this up in the first place. I don't know that there's anything more difficult than observing reality without making meaning of it. For me, I used to talk to my dad about how good, which that's a podcast for another time, how good I was at reading people and how it was really difficult sometimes for me to be honest and really stand up for myself because I felt like at any given moment I can tell what someone really wants despite what they're actually saying, reading their body, reading their tone, their inflection, the words they chose, and how over time I just kind of learned to play into what would be best received. But my dad would always say, if you have a natural instinct and ability to read people, you should really hone that, but hone it to your own advantage. Don't hone it to then do more of what that person says. Hone it so that you can kind of get what you want out of the scenario, but don't let your observations rule you and freeze you up. He was talking to me about a very specific scenario when he gave me that advice, but I've really been thinking about that in particular with this incident because until this very moment, prepping for this episode, to be honest, I never thought about a potential advantage of me just being able to observe how someone acts and how someone reacts, how that advantage can really be like me having peace of mind. I think in my mind, I was kind of like, oh, okay, let me dissect this, and then that could teach me how to communicate back to them, to like make blah 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 happen. But it's like, no, maybe me just observing is a safeguard for me, especially as someone who can overthink. Maybe I'm saving myself from mental toil. Me choosing to observe how someone interacts with me versus making meaning of it benefits me. It helps me give myself enough time to regulate my own emotions before letting someone else's view of me dictate what I do next. I've been trying to just think more and more that observance versus meaning making kind of keeps me in the driver's seat, allowing me to choose. Do I want to think more about that later? How do I feel about this? Did that make my chest kind of flare up? Did that make my nose kind of flare up? Like, did that make my hand clench? And just kind of observing, any good therapist will tell you, observing what these instances do to my body and kind of taking the person out of the scenario and just kind of honing in on myself to be like, okay, what does this mean for me? And what is this doing for me? Do I want to let this go? Do I care that much about it? If I don't know this person, do I care that much about what they think? And at my age, more often time than not, especially just since recently thinking about this more and more, I'm like, it seems like it benefits me more in a lot of these scenarios to let stuff go. I am not the best at letting things go. I have said a trillion times, either on this podcast and to people face to face, the friends I make, I essentially make for life, unless, I'm making a new friend or something. But there's not a lot of newness that I need when it comes to relationships. There's a level of trust that's built and then that's stacked upon and kind of developed over time. And so I don't even know why I said that. I was so nervous, guys. If I'm just honest, I was so nervous to do this podcast today because usually I am either doing an interview or talking about pop culture. And I'm kind of pivoting to do more, mini moments like this one where I'm talking about specific instances that have come up in my life that really mean a lot to me and are much more vulnerable to discuss. And I haven't done a solo podcast in a while, and I swear to God, these are the hardest ones to do because interviewing and like co-hosting, doing it in my sleep. This, it requires a little bit more vulnerability. So I gotta say, I appreciate you all, listening because, yeah, that just kind of came to me. But the reason I do want to do more of these, though, is because I want to keep talking and keep processing with you all about these kind of day-to-day learnings because it's just so, so helpful. Like in this specific instance, realizing that observing can do more for me than trying to calculate the meaning of what someone may be doing in an instance and trying to kind of use that to my advantage or trying to even make sense of how other people show up in the comments they make. I feel like when I step back and just observe, I can actually stay in more control, which at the end of the day, I'm not gonna lie to you, is what I love. I have more control over the situation if I just observe and kind of take myself out of the scenario. So as I thought back on that instance with my colleague, who we're chill, we're chill at this point. But when I reflected on that in that moment, it made me think about herd mentality. And I don't know who all is familiar with that, but I looked it up on Google just to see if I can get a like tight, crisp definition. And there was a Medium article by a person named Nikhil called Do You Have Herd Mentality? And I'll link that in the show notes. And Medium defines herd mentality plainly, clearly as when people do what others are doing just because everyone else is doing it. They follow the crowd without thinking too much for themselves just because everyone else is doing something. They also do the same thing, thinking it would be right. And I'm not gonna lie, I cringe at this very thought. Cringe at this very thought. Just because reading that definition, there's nothing more disassociative to me than allowing my body to follow what someone else is doing just because they're doing it. Like, I've died. I've died and my body's being managed by someone else if you ever catch me doing that, because that is so against every fiber of my being. But the reality is that's such a normal way of being. I want to talk about, though, how just because it's normal doesn't mean it's the best way, nor the only way. And kind of going back to my job example, because just because it's the like best scenario I have right now, I recently started that role. I'm still adjusting to herd culture being the norm of the culture there. And honestly, I've worked at a handful of corporate places. Herd mentality is the mentality at a lot of these places. I most recently came from a political role where that wasn't the energy. Everyone kind of had an opinion, made it loud and clear. We're all very community forward. It is in a very, liberal state, California. And my current job in every single way really couldn't be any more different than that. So role aside, culturally is where that kind of struggle started with me, just because herd mentality really is the norm. Following the crowd, not sticking out, not saying anything different, blending in, getting your work done, moving along. At the end of the day, and here's my thing. I know and I'm close to plenty of people where if you'd ask them to do anything but blend in, my husband, for example, you would literally be asking him to sacrifice a part of himself. Like, to him, pushing or prodding, or I don't even want to say push or prod because that's not really the best way to describe it, but like dissenting in any way is just unnecessary. It's just like, well, why do that when I could just blend in, kind of do the norm? And to me, herd mentality can just kind of feel unfair because I feel like it caters to that sort of personality so well, which in itself isn't an issue, but upon critique of people who don't function normally in that way, it's just really difficult. I'm really resistant to that herd mentality. Like, I'm sure people may roll their eyes at this, but if I'm the sort of person, if there's like a bit of a bathroom line and I walk in it, I will be the one that like walks past the line and kind of looks under the stalls to make sure that there's not one that's already empty that people just don't realize, because so many times that has happened. When you get in a line and whatever service you need, there's actually like space for it. People just got in a line and refused to check whether, I feel like you understand. I don't need to go into that anymore, but I am that person. I say, excuse me, whatever, but like, I will be like, yeah, there's actually an open stall if you wanna go in. And that's not anymore. But the thing is, my approach to life is more of like an ask for forgiveness, not permission sort of vibe. But it's a difficult mentality to have. It's a difficult way to live, I would say. It's just harder when it comes to being that way when herd mentality in a lot of these places can be the norm. I can only speak to my experience. I want to say that a trillion times over, but it does seem like herd mentality can be way more comfortable for people to digest versus other things. And that's what I'm really curious about. So I feel like I'm really curious for folks who are committed to that herd, but don't actually want to be. So these are people outside of my husband. Because again, that's kind of where he likes to live. He's comfortable living there. For people who do that but actually hate that they do that, come to the front of the class and please send me an email, because what's the commitment to that for? Peace? And if so, I'd be so curious how peace is defined. Like, just going against your desire to and like preventing an argument, just that end up leading to peace of mind to you, and true peace of mind, like ease and relaxation in the body. Because I know for me, when I used to do that time and time and time and time and time and time and again, historically, it just kind of led to resentment. And don't hear me wrong. These are obviously there are instances when you just need to do what the group is doing. It's necessary to get to the next step. Following a crowd, may just be the path of least resistance in a moment, and just may be the necessary move to thrive and or survive. I understand that. I'm saying what I am more resistant to, outside of those like singular instances, are just the assumption that someone going against herd mentality is seen as negative, just like by the nature of doing something different elicits a negative sort of critique. And so my friends, I'm sure, are sick of hearing me say, this next part, but I can't stress enough how much I try to think about my day-to-day choices in a way where I'm like, I'm not guaranteed another day. I'm not guaranteed that. And so if I really think about how the life I live in every micro moment, again, walking just like the way I feel like walking, when I think about living true to myself in every moment of every given day, herd mindset just isn't even, it's unfathomable for someone like me, because I can't help but resist falling in line, like that sort of idea. And I feel like that is more true for people than they actually think. There are 8 billion people on this planet. So sure, herd mindset in some ways will be just necessary, like I said, for survival. It may be inevitable, following the crowd, not thinking for yourself, doing things just because someone else is doing it. But I guess what I am just trying to kind of talk through is maybe trying out doing what you want, not out of like frustration or resentment or rebellion even, but just because you may want to do something differently than how people are doing it. Like just putting that in people's minds that like that's just a way some people live, not even consciously comparing themselves to what someone else is doing, just like their natural way being that of a dissenting way. Maybe me walking a different path could have led to me, I don't know, seeing something inspirational that no one got to see just because they decided to follow each other in that specific work instance. But kind of moving past that, I do understand, because I never want to seem so like deluded in my one way of thinking that there's no room for anything else. I feel like that's a fool. I'm not interested in being a fool. So for those people who are just like, I've never thought anything about it, I kind of go with the flow. I pride myself on that. Herd mentality is where I need to be to function right now. I don't want to make any choices on my own, coming up with anything original, let alone walking a different, like my norm, just like my norm is kind of like dissenting by nature. Your norm could just be herding by nature. And I think that's okay. I don't necessarily think it needs to look the same for every single person. But I do want to encourage us to kind of think, like, what is authentically us? Maybe herd mentality makes more sense. I feel like when I'm with my friends and we're doing something really fun, herd mentality all day. Like, I'm like, ooh, when I'm already with people I trust, we're already doing something interesting or just doing something together. I don't find a need to be like, sweet, you guys all want this restaurant. I want that. Herd mentality for me can come out more so in those situations where I'm already with like-minded people. We're kind of already doing our own thing. For me, it tends to present itself most in a work setting, just because I am more kind of like creative minded. My energy is just like, well, I don't know. I just kind of like do what I want, go with the flow. And that's not, depending on where you are, a corporate working norm of the group. I do think herd mentality has got some people in a chokehold, and not a good one, who are just kind of sticking to patterns out of fear or anxiety or indecision. And again, it's a little complex, but I think the reason it was so personal to me and that I wanted to bring it up is to give some food for thought that sometimes folks going against the grain aren't going against the herd, are just doing what they know to do. That's their norm. Your norm is, the complete opposite. Whatever. Let's keep more of an open mind about that, maybe. And I'm curious what you all really think about that. Like, do you personally operate within a herd mentality? Do you see any issue with it? Do you see it as a negative or positive? Do you find it necessary to the human existence to operate out of a herd mentality? Do you feel like, ooh, we even really have a choice? Oh my gosh, this is taking me back. There's this National Geographic series that was all about animals that are a part of like groups and herds and kind of function within big groups, and how like birds fly in flocks and other, animals kind of move together. And it was just a biological thing. So even kind of keeping that in mind, maybe it's less about whether we really want it and more so about like by nature, that's kind of what we will do unless we do feel a really, intrinsic need to not do that for whatever reason. So anyway, thank you all for this time, for a mini moment with me to kind of just process and chat about herd mentality. And let's move on. So nice to talk to you guys about what is on my mind. Let me tell you, there is absolutely more. Where that came from, you can ask my husband. The amount of times I'm talking to him and then he goes just completely like, I'm like, yeah, okay, yep, podcast content. Yep. So, like I said, please reach out with your own thoughts surrounding herd mentality, how you function with or without it. I'm so curious. I would love you all's thoughts. Reach out at jkeim404 at gmail.com. In the meantime, though, until next week, take it easy, breathe deeply, and keep doing what you do. I will catch you next week. Same place, same vibe. Bye.